What's up, everybody? Jack Hermansson versus Joe Bodybags Pyfer goes down this weekend at the Apex. Guys, in this video, we're going to break down this fight, get into some of the X's and O's. We're going to talk about how big of a fight this is for Joe Pyfer, why he really needs to win this thing. But before we get into that, I want to throw up a screenshot that Joe Pyfer actually shared on his Instagram story this past weekend as I tagged him in something. Back in 2018, guys, we had a guy from the gym fight at Art of War fights up in Pennsylvania. And this is a local pro circuit, for those of you that don't know what Art of War is. And Joe Pyfer was fighting. It was one of his fights early in his local pro career. Guys, I've been following Joe Pyfer throughout basically his entire career. I even got to see some amateur fights of this guy on YouTube prior. Didn't know he was fighting that night at Art of War. We stayed, we watched. There's something about Joe Pyfer, ladies and gentlemen. There is something about this guy where when you are around him and you are in the environment around this guy, there's an atmosphere that just presents intensity and just violence. And you can't help but root for Joe Pyfer. His story, everything about this guy is sensational. Now, he is going in there against a veteran guy in Jack Hermansson, who's 35 years of age, who has had some ups and downs throughout his career, but some of the things that we know about Jack Hermansson is he's awkward on the feet, right? I mean, Jack Hermansson's not someone, when you come into a matchup against Jack, you're not necessarily worried about getting knocked out, but what you are worried about is kind of getting caught on the outside and caught in this game where Jack Hermansson's just spamming kicks at you the whole time and you're just not able to close him down and not able to cut him off and he just sits at range the whole time. Or you decide to take him down and he locks up a submission, which we've seen him do time and time again. But when we look at the tail of the tape a little bit here and we look at some of the fights that Jack Hermansson has had most recently, it's kind of been, he's been on this one-win, one-loss streak, back and forth, back and forth. And coming off of his most recent loss, I was actually at this fight where he took on Roman Dolidze. He got submitted. And in that fight, we saw Roman Dolidze. He was able to close the distance. He was able to kind of walk through what Jack Hermansson was throwing at him. And that's kind of the key. If you don't stand on the outside and take pictures against Jack Hermansson, you can have a lot of success. And I believe that in this matchup, we are going to see Joe Pyfer brutally knock out Jack Hermansson. I really, really believe that. And I'm not just saying that because Joe Pyfer is someone I've been rooting for from the beginning, but you know, that is part of the reason. But Joe Pyfer possesses insane power, guys. If you're actually at a Joe Pyfer fight and you hear these shots land, I mean, it's pretty insane. I think that this guy has some of the most power in the division, no doubt. The only thing that makes me a little bit concerned with this matchup is this is a 5-round fight. Now, I know since Pyfer's been in the UFC, all of his fights have been very quick. They've all been by finish. We've seen Joe improve every single time he's been in there. But I always worry, like if you come in there and you can't get a finish and, you know, you're in there against a veteran guy, you know, we don't want to see something happen like what we saw with Mike Malott and Neil Magny. Now, I'm not saying that this is that kind of matchup because we're dealing with a heavy hitter in Joe Pyfer, but I really believe that what Joe Pyfer does, guys, is he is very basic, and that's not a knock on Joe Pyfer. He's very, very good at the basics, and he sticks to the basics, which is what makes him so good. He doesn't do a lot of things that are so extra where he's wasting energy, where he's wasting movement and wasting time. Everything that Joe Pyfer does has purpose, right? He has a very stiff and nasty jab that he likes to utilize, and I believe that that is going to be kind of the difference in this fight. I believe if he can get that going, he can step in. He might have to eat a kick or two, but if he can step in and land one of those hard jabs and have Hermansson feel that power, we're going to see Jack on the back foot for most of this fight because there is a significant power advantage in this matchup that definitely lays on the side of Joe Pyfer. But it's also how Joe Pyfer is able to get to you, right? He starts landing that jab, the right hand starts to follow, and then when you get aggressive and try to either shoot in or try to get a hold of Joe and close the distance, you're going to get caught with that left hook like we saw early in his career against Diaz on the Contender Series, where we saw Joe Pyfer, man, if you try to close the gap recklessly against Pyfer, you are absolutely getting knocked out. And against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, that's a really heavy hitter at 185 too. So Joe Pyfer, we've seen, you can't doubt the power of this man. We know he hits hard. But the question is, can he go in there against a guy that is pretty well-rounded in Jack Hermansson, who has a veteran presence, who has that 5-round experience, who has fought the top of the guys in the division? How does Joe Pyfer do in this matchup? I think he passes this test with flying colors. Joe Pyfer has outstanding grappling as well. He's incredibly strong. He's going to be a lot stronger than Jack Hermansson. I believe that he will be able to fend off any takedowns Jack throws his way. I really believe if anyone's going to have success in the grappling in this matchup, I honestly think it would be Joe Pyfer. I think that he's able to take down Hermansson rather easily, but the question is, will Joe choose to do that, considering that's how Hermansson has finished most of his fights, by locking in some sort of submission. But guys, if this fight is stuck on the feet, I just see it being a real nightmare for Jack Hermansson. Now, I know he likes to sit on the outside and throw a lot of those body kicks. He has very awkward movement, so as long as you don't get kind of caught staring at what Hermansson's doing, like we saw what happened with Chris Curtis, where you talk about the awkward movement, I think Joe Pyfer honestly walks through this guy, man. And I know that it's the 5 rounds, which scares people because it's like he's never really been 5 rounds. But on the local pro scene, those, and you're fighting in those title fights, those are also 5-round fights. Now, he hasn't really went the distance, right? I mean, because a lot of his fights end in finish, and that's how he's knocking people out. And people point to the losses of Joe Pyfer. Guys, a lot of these are injuries that he sustained, right? This guy's had an insane journey. He's had injuries. The story of Joe Pyfer, it's basically impossible not to root for this guy. But long and behold, I believe we see the star born in Joe Pyfer come this Saturday. Now, he's already somebody that everyone's kind of starting to rally behind, right? I mean, everyone, I feel like, feels very positively about Joe Pyfer, but he has to do his job come Saturday night, because the UFC definitely is giving him a matchup that is most winnable in this middleweight division. That's not to say Joe Pyfer can't go out there and beat any middleweight in the world, because I think that he is one of the best middleweights in the world. But this is a very, very good matchup to kind of slowly start working Joe Pyfer into those top fights, which, you know, this is a name in Jack Hermansson. He's been in the division for a while. He's fought the who's who. Now he's kind of towards the tail end of his career. He's still 35, still got some fight left in him. He's taken some time off after that Dolidze loss. But guys, when you see Joe Pyfer, I mean, if you've seen his fights, when this guy lands, people just tend to wear it on their face, where they're like, oh my God, this guy hits really hard. They start to kind of get on their bike. They kind of shut down. I believe we are going to see that Saturday night. I believe Joe Pyfer knocks out Jack Hermansson. It may not happen in the first round, because I think Jack is going to be very cautious, so maybe it's the second round. But I absolutely believe we see a finish definitely within the first 2 rounds by Joe Pyfer. I believe he gets on the microphone, does his job, and then we start to see Joe Pyfer start getting those ranked fights moving forward. But huge opportunity for Pyfer. Crazy seeing him on the local pro scene up in Pennsylvania to now headlining his first UFC event, even though it's a fight night. Tremendous accomplishments. I'm on Team Body Bags here. I think Joe Pyfer gets this thing done. But I want to hear what you all think down in the comments below. Like this video, comment who you're taking in this matchup, subscribe to the channel, help your boy out. Appreciate you all. See you next time.